Germans fear return of scary surveillance. A hidden audio recorder built to fit inside a bedroom door. A tiny camera. These are just some of the ingenious devices used by the East German State Security Police, better known as the between 1950 and 1992, many of which are now on display at the Stasi Museum in Berlin. Yet these devices pale in comparison to the smartphone in your pocket or the in your home that is. Now, Germany's national police, like many law enforcement services, wants access, not only to phone data, but also information collected by digital assistants such as Google Home and Amazon Echo. Germany is planning to discuss this issue in a meeting of interior ministers next week. On Tuesday, too. That set off alarm bells for those monitoring digital privacy rights. Germany is certainly not the only country grappling with where to draw the line on digital privacy. But because of its cybersecurity expert Sven Herpig said German policies have traditionally been supportive of encryption for this very reason. But in the case of digital assistants like Google Home or Amazon Echo, much of the data gathered is not held in Germany, but in outside countries, especially the United States. On Thursday, 4. Digital evidence is needed in about 85% of criminal investigations, and in 2/3 of these cases, the evidence must be obtained from outside service providers, particularly in the US. But digital rights groups in Germany have criticized the EU proposals, pointing out that Germany's strict privacy laws can be subverted and arguing that current proposals don't take into account whether a crime committed in one country is necessarily considered a crime in another. Germans know from personal experience how mass surveillance can be abused. Today, a German with digital devices, however, it is private companies that are mining the data gathered through this surveillance around the world. Now, warns this.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.